All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ellen Koekoeks, and I serve as the Global Advisor for FAST, the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics. And to start, I would like to sincerely thank Ionis and ULTRAGENYX for being here with us today and for their willingness to inform the European Angelman community about their clinical trials, because I know it means a lot to our families to have direct access to this information. So we really appreciate it. I also want to say how wonderful it is that today it's the very first official collaboration between FAST and the Angelman Syndrome Alliance, and hopefully it will be the first of many. And with that, I would like to take a moment to quickly introduce FAST and share a bit about who we are and what we do. So I don't know if we can pull the slides up. Just a second. So yes, here we are. So if you move to the next slides. So yes, here we are. So FAST is the leading patient advocacy organization working to cure Angelman syndrome. We have only one mission, that is to cure Angelman syndrome. And by cure, we mean bringing transformative treatments that can bring significant improvements to the lives of our loved ones living with Angelman syndrome. Now, as the largest non-governmental funder of Angelman research worldwide, our goal is very simple, and that is to accelerate the development of transformative therapies for all individuals with Angelman syndrome, regardless of their age and genotype. Next slide, please. So we work through what we call a bench-to-bedside model, and that is building collaborations with academics and industry, establishing the necessary infrastructure, and ensuring that research can move as quickly and as safely as possible from proof to concept into the clinic. Now, over the years, FAST has invested more than $60 million in Angelman research. This investment allows us to accelerate therapies across multiple approaches. Next slide. Now, FAST is a global organization with 9 FAST affiliates across the world, and you will see them here on the slide. So we have FAST Australia, FAST Canada, FAST Latam, which is Latin America. And then in Europe, we have FAST UK, FAST Italy, FAST Poland, FAST France, FAST Germany, and FAST Spain. And together we work to bring promising therapies to every family living with Angelman syndrome. Next slides. And then to close, I would like to warmly invite you to our annual FAST Global Science Summit taking place on November 7 and 8 in Orlando, Florida. And please don't worry about language barriers. Live translations will be available. So if you're interested, all details and registration can be found on our website, which is cureangelman.org. And then I would like to give the word now to Manuel, who will represent the Angelman Syndrome Alliance. Manuel.
Yeah. Thank you. Alan, can you see my screen? Yes, I think you can. So Angelman Syndrome Alliance, it is the checking. Yeah. So it's a partnership of equals. Most of you may not know ASA, but you know our members. So we are a partnership of small organizations from around the world that are focused on financing and promoting research and basic research on Angelman syndrome. Our mission is to grow, support scientific knowledge about Angelman syndrome and create fundamental and lasting changes in therapy for people with Angelman syndrome. A quick presentation. So on the top end right, you can see our members. So our members, what they do is give support to you and your families locally in your countries. What we do is combine funds from these organizations to fund basic and translational therapy. For as much as enthusiasm we have for all these clinical trials, there's still so much that we don't know, and this is why we feel it's still important to keep on funding basic research to get the next questions. Here you can see alphabetically who our members are and the local organizations that we have. We kindly ask you to keep supporting these organizations so they can support you on your day-to-day, and they can support us in our mission to fund basic research. Some quick numbers: over the years, we've been able to fund over 1.5 million euros in basic research. We fund 12 research projects. We've put together 8 scientific conferences. We have an ongoing call until the end of October for new grants for 2026, and we have our scientific conference being held in Kyoto next year. Anything else you can find on our website, and we are very glad to have you all here today. So I'll just stop sharing. I don't know if I can. Yeah.
Thank you, Manuel. And now it's time to hear directly from ULTRAGENYX. We're all very excited to hear that. They will be sharing the latest updates on their clinical trials. And I'm very happy to introduce our speakers of today. And we have, first of all, Julie Harrell, Senior Director, Patient Enrollment Liaison at ULTRAGENYX. And second of all, we have Dr. Vamshi Rao, Senior Director, Medical Affairs Neurology at ULTRAGENYX. Julie and Vamshi, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ellen. Glad to be here with my colleague, Julie. As Ellen said, my name is Vamshi, and you see Julie here, who's from the Patient Enrollment Liaison. Good evening, everybody. It gives us great pleasure to talk to you on behalf of ULTRAGENYX regarding the results of the phase 1/2 open label study, and also to give you a clinical program update. But before we do that, we want to take this moment to thank the organizers for the opportunity to showcase ULTRAGENYX's work on Angelman syndrome. We also want to thank all the investigators and their teams for all the hard work that they put into a smooth running of a clinical trial. And the biggest thanks to all of you, the families out there, without whose patience, dedication, and passion we would not be here. Next slide, please. Before we begin, I wanted to make sure that we absolutely understand that our product is an investigational drug, GTX-102, and is not currently approved by any regulatory authority. And the other thing to remember is that the data that I will share are from an open label trial. So they must be interpreted as such without any definitive conclusions about safety and efficacy. And Julie and I are proud employees of ULTRAGENYX. Next slide, please. So before we begin, I wanted to make sure that we get a little bit of a knowledge about our company, ULTRAGENYX. We're a global company. We're based in Novato, California, in the US, and comprise approximately 1,300 employees. Our whole mission, which is led from the front by our CEO, Dr. Kakis, is to serve the rare disease community. We believe that by asking the rare disease community, such as yourself, what it means to live day to day and year to year with these conditions, we understand better and can work harder and smarter to further research and innovation, which could make a positive difference in the lives of individuals with rare diseases. Next slide, please. So you all know better, and you can, I'm sure, can teach me, but it never hurts to repeat the mechanism of Angelman syndrome. Angelman syndrome, as you know, results from the lack of UBE3A protein in the brain. And our product, GTX-102, is an antisense oligonucleotide. So what you see here in the graphic on the right side, especially in the second panel on the right side, is that the antisense transcript really prevents UBE3A protein from being formed. But our product GTX-102 actually attaches to the antisense transcript, and by a series of steps breaks down the antisense transcript. And in this sense, the normal UBE3A gene can then manufacture the UBE3A protein. And this is all happening on the paternal copy because we know that the maternal copy may be deleted and the paternal copy is non-functional. Next slide, please. Since the UBE3A protein is postulated to be involved in brain function, we anticipate that it could potentially improve the core symptoms of Angelman syndrome. So we therefore designed our phase 1/2 trial based on some of these domains that thanks to you as a community, were identified as important to you and were being evaluated in natural history studies. We observed, as I will show, that there were improvement in cognition, receptive communication, hyperactivity and noncompliance, sleep, and motor skills. We did see cases of lower extremity weakness that resolved, and participants were allowed to be redosed without any recurrence. Again, just to remind you that GTX-102 is still an investigational molecule, and we plan to continue to study its safety and efficacy in ongoing and upcoming clinical trials, and I will share information on some of those. Next slide, please. So this slide is a nice graphical representation of how we at ULTRAGENYX have designed how to study GTX-102 in clinical trials. So going into the details of the study, which I will also do in the next slide, we really started with our phase 1/2 study. This was the first in human trial in children aged 4 to 17 years old with maternal UB38 deletion. This is the trial whose data I'm going to show and go over today. And the enrollment for this study has been completed. This helped us really understand the potential safety and efficacy of GTX-102. Now, as you look towards the right, under the phase 3, we are really happy to report as a company that the phase 3 ASPIRE study that is evaluating the efficacy in 4 to 17-year-old deletion participants has been completely enrolled as of July 2025. So thanks to all of you, our community, and our investigators again for doing that. The Aurora study is a study that will study the effect of GTX-102 in all genotypes of Angelman syndrome and will look at age groups below 4 and above 18 years old. Our plan is to start the Aurora trial enrollment before the end of 2025. Information about these trials will be used to discuss and file with the regulatory agencies, and hopefully in the future, we will have an approved product. But when approved medications are studied, they are continued to study beyond phase 3 trials in what is termed as phase 4. Next slide, please. And you can go and click. And 3 more clicks. Yes, please. Thank you. So this slide is a recap of all the trials that I just mentioned in the previous slide. So the phase 1/2 study, the enrollment is complete, where it was the first in human trial. The phase 3 ASPIRE study is completely enrolled. It started enrolling in December 2024. The phase 2 study is the one that includes all genotypes and all ages, and we plan to open enrollment in 2025. What I did not mention in the previous slide is we have a long-term extension study, which is the study where all the participants from phase 1 to phase 3 and phase 2 Aurora study will land into and will be continued to study in terms of their efficacy and safety with GTX-102. This study opened in summer of 2024. Next slide, please. All right, so with all that background, let's jump into the phase 1/2 trial data from our last analysis, which was September 2024, which as our data cut. Next slide. Before we start looking at numbers and graphs, I just wanted to go over what this is based on. The phase 1/2 trial data is from our cohorts 4 to 7 and A and B, which were the dose escalation and dose expansion cohorts that received planned loading and maintenance doses. These are also the groups that were closely matched and had the most long-term data amongst them. And we looked at domains that you told us were important in this trial, which was cognition, communication, sleep, behavior, and motor function, in addition to informing safety. Next slide, please. So not to go into every detail on this slide, but when we look at a table such as this, what we're really trying to look at is whether the two groups, the 4 to 7 and A to B that we are studying, are really comparable in terms of their baseline characteristic. And as you can see, most of the baseline characteristic in terms of the domains are really, really comparable. Next slide, please. So another place that I will express my gratitude to all of you is this slide, which is the natural history study. And natural history studies are a test of patience and your commitment to provide data that can be very useful for clinical trials. And this is important because when you're doing your initial clinical trials, such as the phase 1/2 study, you don't have a comparison group. So you can use the natural history studies to sort of see what the differences are. So we looked at these 2 natural history studies for children 4 to 17 years old with maternal deletion specifically when we compared it to our phase 1/2 study. Next slide, please. So let's begin with cognition, a really important domain that has to do with how we learn things, use memory, etc. We used a scale called the Bailey for cognition. You will notice that there are 2 panels on this slide. The GSV, or the growth scale value on the left side, is a way to mathematically transform raw data, which you see on the right side, so that it can be more linear and it's easier to interpret and compare across the studies and population. But what is more important here is the 2 graphs next to each other look very similar in their pattern. What I mean by that is when you look at the day 365 and day 506, you are seeing that they are showing continued improvement on both sides. The dotted line on the left side is really what the Bailey Statistical Manual deems as significant. And you can see that both at day 365 and 506 that we see statistical significance. This gave us enough evidence that we could use this as one of the domains to see what our phase 3 changes look like in our ASPIRE study, which we are continuing to do. Next slide, please. We know since Angelman affects multiple aspects of an individual life, and not every individual is the same, we need to look at other domains. And one of those domains is receptive communication. On this slide, you can see that the GTX-102 treated participants showed continued improvement over time above the threshold of 6 that is considered statistically significant. And when you compare that to the natural history group on the right side, you'll notice that the scale does not increase much beyond the 2 number around the 1-year mark. We heard from some families that this really means that the children can potentially be able to understand better and they could be engaging in tasks and participate in things like therapy sessions and play. Next slide, please. Sleep is another important domain for both the individual and caregiver, and we know that often disrupted sleep for the individual can also mean disrupted sleep for the family. So we looked at a sleep scale using a sleep scale called the ASA, and we noticed that the treated individual showed reduction in sleep severity, which on the left-hand side, arrow down or going down really means improvement, overall improvement. This scale utilizes answers to sleep-related questions that you see displayed on the right side graph, which is labeled the CGIC. These are questions which are based on a 7-point scale, where 1 being not at all impaired and 7 being most severe. So families tell us that could potentially mean a better sleep for the whole family. Next slide, please. Similarly, we looked at the gross motor component of the ASA scale, and you can see again that there is overall improvement that you can see on the left side. And it is very similarly based on the questions that you use on the CGIC scale on the right side. And a better gross motor, an improvement in gross motor could mean better balance. It could mean that families are not worried about children falling and hurting themselves potentially. Next slide, please. Behavior, a very, very important domain because behavior can be very disruptive and maladaptive. So we looked at a scale called the ABCC, and you will notice that the treated individuals on the left side show improvements that are sustained at 1 year of age, and it surpasses that threshold line that you see, meaning that it is not just by random chance, and it is statistically significant. When you compare that to the natural history on the right side, you don't see much improvement over time. Next slide, please. All right, let's look at all of this together, because we know that Angelman syndrome affects everybody differently, and the changes due to treatment can also be very different at the individual level. So what we have here is what we call the multi-domain responder index, or the MDRI. So let me walk you through what you're seeing on the right side. What you're seeing in rows there is each individual participant, and what you're seeing in the columns is the different domains, such as cognition, motor, sleep, behavior. And the colors denote, the green color denotes improvement, white is no change, and pink is worsening. The way we score this is by putting what we call a minimally important difference, which is a threshold for each of the domain. When they're above the threshold, we call it an improvement. So all the green that you see there is improvement. So when you take an individual participant across a row, they could improve in 5 domains, all 5 of them, like you see in the top 2 rows, or they could just improve in 1 domain, like you see in the bottom row, or they could not improve in any domain. So these are things where we can put a sort of a totality together when we look at Angelman syndrome. So when we look at all of our participants here, we see that 79% of our participants in the cohort A and B had clinically impactful improvement in at least 1 domain. Next slide, please. So you could ask what this means. What does this mean in a day-to-day, in your day-to-day life? Well, it means that there could be acquisition of some new skills or specific skills. And this is something we presented previously. So if you look at the color coding and what it means on the left side, you can see that this could mean that there are improvements in terms of somebody following more direction, they're able to communicate a little bit more, they were more alert, or they had less frequent awakenings or reduced falls. Next slide, please. Obviously, in any clinical trial, especially with phase 1-2, you always want to monitor safety and continue to monitor safety. So therefore, we looked at all the events related to safety. And here we list in the top bullet the most frequent that happened during the study. Safety evaluation also looks at whether these events are related to Angelman syndrome itself due to the treatment or the procedure, such as a lumbar puncture that is used to deliver the drug. We did find lower extremity weakness that was mostly seen in the initial 5 participants when we had the earlier cohorts who had a much higher dose. But since then, we have put considerable thought into the amount of dose, and we've also initiated what we call mitigation or preventative measures. And since then, we've had less incidence of lower extremity weakness. Whatever we had, everyone has recovered, and there have been no long-term sequelae, and the participants have been redosed without any recurrence. The 2 subjects in the dose expansion cohort and 1 in cohort 7 that had lower extremity weakness are also doing well without any sequelae or recurrence. And we also want to emphasize that there have been no new cases of lower extremity weakness. So overall, this slide really shows that the GTX-102 demonstrates an acceptable profile and is well tolerated. Next slide, please. All right, so to summarize, our phase 1-2 showed that we see consistent and sustained improvements, in some cases approximately up to 3 years where the data is available. There have been no additional cases of lower extremity weakness, and the safety profile remains consistent. The phase 3 ASPIRE study that opened enrollment in December of 2024 has completed enrollment by July 2025. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. This is our slide about ASPIRE. But what I just wanted to mention here are, just to remind everybody, ASPIRE is our study that is ongoing. It is for 4 to 17-year-old with deletion. It is completely enrolled. This is a study that involved a sham-controlled study design where people who were in the control arm would move into the treatment arm after 1 year. The study is ongoing, and we are going to release more and more data and updates in the upcoming future. Now, more information about who the sites were in our phase 3 ASPIRE study can be found on clinicaltrial.gov page. Next slide, please. So Aurora, a different view of our slide, another pretty slide, is the study that will look at all genotypes and ages, and is planned to start before the end of 2025. Now, any information about Aurora and updates on those information can also be found on clinicaltrials.gov. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to invite Julie to go over this slide.
Hi. Yes, so the question would be, how can you get more information about participating in Aurora? First, consult with your medical team. You may want to talk with your child's doctor and your family and decide if this study or trial is right for you. And then you can direct questions directly to your clinical trial sites when they're activated. In addition, ULTRAGENYX has a team to help understand the Aurora trial. And our team, together with our clinical trial operations team, can help find a trial site which is accepting referrals or patients that's within a convenient geographical region for both you and your family. And once that site is identified, our team will help establish a connection. You can contact our team with the information below you see on your slide. Primarily, we have an email address, and it's trialrecruitment@ultragenyx.com. Thanks.
And you can click through. Thank you. So previous slide, please. I just wanted to go over the summary slide quickly. Thank you. So in summary, the phase 1/2 results show a promising benefit-risk profile. The global phase 3 ASPIRE study is fully enrolled as of July 2025. All the GTX-102 clinical trial participants will continue to receive GTX-102 through the long-term extension study. Aurora is going to be our global study planned for enrollment before the end of 2025. And for any further updates that you need, please visit clinicaltrials.gov for the latest information, including the information about Aurora. Thank you so much for your attention, and best wishes.
Okay, thank you very much to both. Before we go on to the questions, just a quick housekeeping first. Due to legal and time constraints, both FAST and ASA, we pre-prepared some questions, so we will not have an open question webinar. You will be able to write your questions down in the Q&A, and then they will be referred to both Ionis and ULTRAGENYX for reply afterwards. Also, please keep in mind, those of you who are using auto translation, that translation may not be exact, and just be aware of that. So in that in mind, thank you very much to both. And the first question we would have is, will the participants in Aurora trial receive the same dosage as the ones in the ASPIRE trial?
Oh, thank you, Manuel. I think that's a great question. We do plan to carry forward some dosing regimen from what we have learned in our ASPIRE trial in our participants who are 4 years old and older in the Aurora study. So we will assess safety and efficacy of doses that we plan to study in the younger ones with a smaller dose, because they're younger and they're lighter when we do that with Aurora.
All right. Thank you so much, Vamshi. I have another question about the Aurora trial. I think that's the one that's on everybody's minds. A lot of people are wondering if the Aurora trial will be held at the current clinical trial sites that are conducting the ASPIRE trial as well? Or will there be new and additional sites for the Aurora trial? Can you comment on that?
Oh, absolutely, Ellen. I think in Aurora, we will try to include a mixture of both sites who've had experience with our trials, with the GTX-102 clinical trials, as well as sites who are completely new to our program. And this is because every site takes a different amount of time to start up because there are so many procedures involved. And ULTRAGENYX works with each site very closely to try to expedite the process. Similar to how sites were announced for Aspire on sort of a rolling basis when we did that, I think we will do something similar for Aurora, and clinicaltrials.gov will be the source of truth as trials come on and are activated in terms of the Aurora study.
All right, thank you so much. And I think that's it for the questions for ULTRAGENYX for now. And then we'll move to our next session with Ionis, who will be presenting on their clinical trial. And now I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. First of all, we have Rob Komorowski, Director of Clinical Developments at Ionis. Hi, Rob. Then we have Valerie Coletta, also Director, Clinical Project Lead at Ionis. And last of all, but not least, we have Rob Goldstein-Mahon, Director, Patient Advocacy at Ionis. Welcome, Rob, Valerie, and Rob. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ellen Emanuel, and to everybody at FAST and the Angelman Syndrome Alliance for the opportunity to come and speak with the community in the United Kingdom and the European Union today. We take these opportunities very seriously and not for granted. We know that your time is very valuable to you, so we're going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes trying to relay as much information we can about our ongoing Angelman syndrome research program here at Ionis, and welcome questions in follow-up as you have them. Next slide, please. So we just introduced ourselves, and Rob and Val will talk to you a little bit more about their work in their sections. Next slide. Quick disclaimers. We are all very proud employees here at Ionis. And it's important to just note again that we're going to talk about an investigational product called ION582. It is still in trial. It has not been approved to be marketed as a treatment for any disease indication by the European Medicines Agency or any other regulatory body. The information that we're going to walk through today is for educational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice. We remind you to consult your doctor as the primary source of information about your health or the health of your loved ones. Next slide. For those of you that are unaware or unfamiliar with Ionis, Ionis has been around for about 35 years. We are located in Southern California, just outside of San Diego, and the company really has been a pioneer in the development of RNA-targeted medicines during that time. We've had the great fortune, as you see in a minute, to work in a bunch of different disease indications, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to work with the Angelman community to explore the potential of ION582 or 582 with all of you. Our company is really driven by the passion to innovate. You know, we really try to combine that groundbreaking science and technology with the unmet need that is out there. And we really are driven to have an impact on people's lives in ways that matter to them. Next slide. We've been working over the last 35 years in a lot of different disease areas, and we've had the really wonderful opportunity to work in a bunch of different communities and bring several products to market in different regions around the world, such as Spinraza, Qalsody, or Wainua. Additional products have been approved since this slide was put together. But as you can see, you know, the portfolio in the neurology space in particular that Ionis is focused on is pretty diverse. You know, and today we're focusing on our work in Angelman syndrome, where we have two ongoing studies. But the company has had a lot of experience in the development and the discovery, development, and commercialization of RNA-targeted medicines in our more than 3-decade-long history. Next slide. What we are hoping to start with, again, is to try to recognize the work that we've been doing at Ionis is not in isolation. Every movement forward in Angelman syndrome that we've been able to take that step has been taken hand in hand with the Angelman syndrome community. And that started all the way back in the preclinical setting to really try to understand this disease and the biology of it. And we entered into some really fortunate research collaborations that contributed to the understanding of Angelman syndrome in important ways, and Rob will tell you more about them in a couple of minutes. We've been involved in collecting natural history data with the Angelman syndrome community. Many of you on the phone have probably contributed data through various natural history studies over the years, and we've been working very closely with ASA, ORSA, FAST, ASF, and many other organizations during this time, not just attending their conferences, but seeking out their advice and support each and every way. Whenever we have a question about this disease, we start by understanding that we need to listen. And we need to learn from people that are experts in Angelman syndrome, and those are the families, all of you on the phone here today. And we bring that information forward in each part of the drug development pipeline. So again, when we advanced out of the preclinical setting and got into those earlier stages of clinical development, we went back and we tried to learn more about what mattered to people, so that we were measuring what was important in our clinical trials, and we were setting ourselves up to potentially discover and develop medicines that would actually address the needs of people living with this disease. So we got deeply involved during that period in various consortia, such as ABOM and Ladder and others along the way. And I'm going to spend a minute on this last I'm going to spend another minute in this last section on late-stage clinical development, because this is really important that we wanted to try to provide education to all of you about. That when we get ready to put investigational medicine into clinical trial, that's a pretty heavy thing to do. And it's a really bit of bravery that every single person takes when they enroll in a clinical trial. So we try to start again when we're putting our clinical trials together by listening and trying to understand what we can do in the company to understand ways to reduce the burden of participation that people may have in clinical trials, and to make sure, again, that we've set ourselves up to measure things that matter to people. And I want to just spend a minute on the next slide telling you a little bit about that work. In the last, if you go to the next slide, in the last few years, nope, you had it, there you go, thank you. In the last few years, as we prepared to get ION582 into clinical trial, we spent a lot of time, again, with the community. So the trials have been developed by learning from people living with this disease and their caregivers through various advisory meetings. We've held several of them over the last few years with a couple of dozen different people in multiple different regions around the world. We are very grateful to have been able to work with ASA to bring together a community advisory board with 9 caregivers in many different regions around the world to help inform our research program. And of course, scientists and doctors and physicians and others have been very much part of this process along the way. But everything we do in the clinical development aspect of 582 is based on what we hear from the community. So just a couple of things that we've heard along the way that we've tried to think about building in going forward. One, we understand that travel can be challenging. Angelman syndrome presents a lot of different challenges, both to the person diagnosed, their families, and their caregivers. So understanding travel in particular to sites, what that looks like, the challenges that they may face along the way, and how we can consider that as we put together our trials to make sure we're optimizing the time that people spend away from home and in the clinic to help us understand what's going on with as few visits as possible, for example. We also understand that being at a clinical trial site for an extended period of time is also challenging. And talking through these advisory meetings, what we can do to make those visits to the clinic, again, as least burdensome as possible, how we can help patients and families through those clinical trials visits, in the easiest way possible, moving from one room to the other, going from test to test, spending potentially many hours at a clinic can be pretty onerous. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand what we can do together with our clinical trial sites to make that visit as easy as possible for people participating. But first, understanding that it is a challenge and accepting that. And one of the things that we also learned out of this process was that it was really important to understand, or essential rather, to understand what people expect out of clinical trials, and understand further what we can do to support them as they move through that process. Clinical trials are inherently research activities, and every single person that chooses to be part of them is making a choice to contribute in massive ways to the rest of the community. So through these listening and learning opportunities, we hope to design trials that allow us to bring people into these clinical trials in the most comfortable way possible, while also ensuring that we collect rigorous data so that we get an answer at the end of it on what the next steps in this program may be. If you can go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Rob in a second. I just wanted to close by saying again, thank you to everybody who's participated in our clinical development program for 582 over the years. We really could not be at this stage without you, and all of us at Ionis are excited to continue to go down this path together. Rob?
Thanks so much, Rob, and thanks everybody for joining us live or either watching on the video after the fact. My name is Robert Komorowski. I work in clinical development here at Ionis, and I'm going to spend a few minutes here giving you a bit of background on ION 582. So you can jump to the next slide, please. So ION 582 is an investigational medicine developed by Ionis to potentially treat individuals living with Angelman syndrome. Now, of course, many of you all know this background, but just to summarize briefly, Angelman syndrome is caused by a loss of function of the UB3A protein as a result, typically, of a deletion or a mutation of the UB3A gene inherited from the mother. Now, there's a copy of the UB3A gene that exists on the father's gene. However, that protein can't be produced because there's a piece of RNA called the UB3A antisense, or ATS for short, and that prevents that protein from being expressed from the father's allele. Now, we all know UB3A protein is really critical for development. It's particularly important for brain cells or neurons to function properly and really their ability to communicate or talk to one another. And that communication is really necessary for the brain to be able to learn and develop. So ION 582 is designed to target that UB3A antisense and remove it so that the UB3A gene from the father can now be unsilenced and then ultimately produce UB3A protein in the brain and hopefully help with some of those communication issues between cells in the brain and have a clinical impact. Next slide, please. So the path to identify ION 582 took a lot of rigorous work by the researchers at Ionis, as well as a collaboration with a lot of amazing scientists and clinicians, and most importantly, the families in the Angelman community. So I'll take you a little bit through that journey here. Started off, as these things often do, with an idea first proposed by Dr. Robert Baudet, that the UB3A gene on the father's allele could be unsilenced by eliminating the ATS. And so Ionis partnered with Dr. Baudet, as well as other researchers and physicians who've been studying UB3A for years. I mean, the Angelman community is so fortunate to have such a great set of clinicians and researchers working on this disease. So wanted to take advantage of that and ultimately try to understand how the UB3A ATS, the antisense, could be effectively targeted to be removed with an antisense oligonucleotide, or an ASO. So that led to a publication, if you just jump to kind of the next pop-up, in collaboration with Dr. Baudet, that showed that UB3A could be actually unsilenced from the paternal allele as a result of being targeted with an ASO. So that gave us that as we call it, proof of concept in an animal model. This was in an Angelman mouse model, that an ASO could indeed impact the levels of UB3A protein in the brain in those mice. So that's when our team at Ionis got to work with their 30+ years of experience making ASOs, really working with some of the best chemists and drug developers to identify an ASO that they felt would be both potent and selective, but also prioritizing the safety profile of that drug. In parallel, you can just jump back a slide, that's okay. There, thank you. So in parallel, we on the clinical team have been working with the Angelman community, attending many of your conferences and meetings across the globe to really understand what those of you, the families and clinicians, are dealing with Angelman in terms of the symptoms and most importantly, how the families and the people living with Angelman syndrome are impacted by those symptoms. And the goal was, so when we got to the point of getting the drug to the clinic, that we'd have the best tools available to be able to measure those symptoms and ensure that the symptoms we're measuring are ones that matter to the patients and ultimately the families as well. So this has been a long journey with ups and downs, but persevered through it, and ultimately we've identified ION582, which we're testing in the clinic to determine whether it's a potentially safe and effective treatment for Angelman syndrome. So you can jump to the next slide. One more. Oh, maybe one more. There we go. So this takes you through, oh, sorry, go back one. There we go. So this takes you through our overall development program, and really our overall goal here is to run an efficient and rigorous scientific evaluation of the safety and efficacy of ION582. And the goal is at the end of this is to generate data that, if it supports it, having a clear path to approval and ultimately access of ION582 as quickly as possible. So, as some of you may be aware, the drug development process can be a long one. There's high bars set by both the sponsors, the drug developers, as well as the regulators, to ensure that the medicines that are approved really meet that high criteria of being both safe and effective. So typically this process involves 3 different phases of development. It can include 3 or more separate clinical trials. But in rare disease, sometimes we have the opportunity to shorten that into two separate clinical trials. And that's kind of the approach we've taken here with Angelman, where the first trial, phase 1/2, is done testing the drug directly in individuals with the disease instead of the process where typically the drug would be tested in healthy individuals first. And the primary goal of that first study is to evaluate the safety of the drug and look at different doses of that drug and how it behaves in the body. But we also try to look to see if there's any preliminary evidence that there's a clinical benefit of that treatment. So these studies typically last a couple months to years, and they tend to be relatively small in rare diseases, under 100 participants. And then based upon that data, if the data look good and it supports the safety profile, we're able to identify doses that we think can also be potentially clinically beneficial, then you can jump right to a phase 3 study. And that's the study that really focuses on getting that information needed for regulatory agencies to approve the medicine. And what is that? Well, primarily that's demonstrating that the drug provides clinical benefit, but also still keeping safety in mind as well. So these are longer studies. They tend to involve more participants, in this example, more than 100. So if you jump to the next slide, you can see kind of how this translates to our HALO study, which is an ongoing phase 1/2 study. This was the first in human study of ION582. That study continues today, and I want to take the opportunity really to thank all the individuals, their families, as well as the clinicians, the staff that participate in this study. These studies are not possible without people taking out time and effort to be able to participate and contribute to the research process. And so we're so grateful for all of your time and effort for that. And so we've continued to collect data from that here, and those results we feel have been encouraging, really support the advancement of ION582 to a phase 3 clinical trial and reveal. So this study will continue going. HALOS is super important. We want to get long-term safety data as well as continue to look at the efficacy data, but we feel like we have enough data for our phase 3 evaluation. And next slide can tell you a little bit more about the 2 studies. And you can click through here. So HALOS, that phase 1/2 study, that's enrolled about 50 individuals ranging from 2 to 50 years old, individuals with either deletion or mutation of UB3A, and they've all received ION582 across a number of different doses, who are now all in a long-term extension. They were all receiving active drug here, continuing to receive that for an additional 3 years. We also wanted to report that we're planning to open enrollment in HALOS for individuals under 2 years old later this year. And the goal here really is to understand the safety profile as well as exploratory efficacy of ION 582 in that younger population that we haven't yet studied. Really excited for that possibility to see how ION 582 can perform with early intervention. So REVEAL, which Valerie's going to take you through in more detail in a second, but this study started recently. It's designed here to really focus on the efficacy as well as the safety of ION 582 in both children and adults with Angelman syndrome. Study's going to enroll approximately 200 participants from 2 to 50 years old. Again, deletion and mutation genotypes. The same process is going to be a different group of patients, but the same sort of process of delivering ION 582 into the CSF with an intrathecal injection, which Valerie will go into in a second. And the primary objective of that study will be looking at the impact of ION 582 on expressive communication. So that's the ability to use sounds, gestures, words to communicate using the Bailey-4, which Valerie will also go into a little bit. So just to update you, several sites have opened in the US. We're planning for additional sites to be open in the US as well as globally in the coming months. So this is a really exciting time for us as this study gets off the ground. So you can jump to the next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Valerie, who's going to tell you a bit more about the phase 3 REVEAL study. Valerie?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Ellen and the FAST community for inviting us to talk about our phase 3 design. Next slide, please. So the REVEAL study is a global phase 3 trial of ION 582 in children and adults with Angelman syndrome. As Rob pointed out, we are recruiting subjects with either a mutation or a deletion in the UB3A gene. We'll be recruiting about 200 patients between the ages of 2 and 50. It is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, and the dosings will occur every 3 months. The primary objective of the REVEAL study is to evaluate the effect of ION 582 on the expressive communication of the Angelman patients. And there are several key important secondary endpoints that involve cognition, receptive communication, the overall disease severity, sleep, the motor functional skills, the daily living skills of all of the participants. And we also will be evaluating the safety objectives on an ongoing basis via a board of independent physicians who periodically will be evaluating the safety of all of the subjects in the trial. The trial did start in May of this year. The first sites have been open in the US and enrollment has started. It's the global study, so clinical sites around the world will begin to be open later this year. And as these sites are opened, we will post that on clinicaltrials.gov in a timely manner. And everyone, you can see that on the website there. The trial lasts about 3.5 years for each individual. It's composed of 2 main phases. The first one is a 1-year-long double-blind placebo-controlled period where patients would randomly be assigned to ION 582 or placebo, and then a 2-year long-term extension study where all patients will receive ION 582. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. Next slide, please. One more click, I think, Ellen or Megan. Thank you. So this is just a slide really quickly to show the Bailey scale is the main assessment that is used for the primary endpoint and some of the key secondary. It's a holistic evaluation of the Angelman syndrome patients. It will cover all types of communication, cognition, fine motor and gross motor skills of all of the patients over time throughout the study. Although this scale was not invented for Angelman syndrome, it is suitable for the evaluation of possible treatments in the Angelman syndrome subjects, and has been used in natural history studies and a lot of other clinical trials with other potential treatments for Angelman syndrome disease. Next slide, please. So the Ionis's antisense oligonucleotides that do have potential effect on disorders that are in the central nervous system are administered via lumbar punctures, as other ASOs are. So these pictures will show the procedure, how it's done. So you'll see right on the left, the first picture, the participants who will receive the ASO do undergo sedation before the procedure starts. Then there is a lumbar puncture that happens between L3 and L4 in the spinal cord. And after the puncture happens and CSF is collected, the study medication is then injected through the same part, and where it can then travel up to the central nervous system and take effect. Next slide, please. I think maybe one more click. Okay, I'll just talk through it. So a little bit more detail on the study design. There are various phases of the trial. The first phase is a screening phase where potential participants will be evaluated to determine whether they qualify for the study. After which, if they do, they would be randomly assigned to one of the three study arms. And they are, one would be 40 milligrams of the ION 582, the other 80 milligrams, and or placebo. So that would be a random assignment to one of these three treatments. The treatment's given every 3 months on each arm. This double-blind phase will last 1 year, after which all of the subjects who were randomly assigned to placebo will then be assigned to one of the two ION 582 for the remaining 2 years of the study. I believe that's my last slide. If I can pass it back to Rob G.
Thanks, Val, very much. And thank you all for listening to us over the last few minutes. To just quickly summarize, the phase 3 REVEAL study is active. We opened our first sites in the United States, and we're working to add additional recruitment sites inside the US and outside the US in the coming months. And clinicaltrials.gov.org is the place to go for information about that trial, as well, importantly, as your doctor. As Rob mentioned, the HALO study continues to produce additional data through the long-term extension part of that trial, and we do plan to open a cohort in that study for individuals under the age of 2 later this year, with more information on that coming. And we are really just eager to continue to listen and learn from all of you with Angelman syndrome and hear your stories and learn more about what's going on in your lives and what's important to you to help inform where we go from here with this program at Ionis. Thank you, Ellen and Manuel, for the opportunity to provide an update. Happy to take the questions.
Thank you, Rob and Valerie, and Rob again. You already addressed this a little bit, but we will have to try and push you a little bit more. When can we expect some official announcement about trials in Europe specifically?
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. And we are happy to try to address it as directly as we can. You know, we cannot provide specific timing for when the first site will open in the European Union or the United Kingdom. However, we are working with those sites in different countries to open them as quickly as possible. It's our practice at Ionis, really, in any of our trials, to not disclose a site as active until that site has completed all of the necessary paperwork to become active. You know, we get everything ready to go, because that process take some time, and things can change along the way. So we don't want to, as we would say in the US, let our tips get ahead of our skis. But we do promise to keep FAST, ASA, and other organizations up to date as new sites come on board. And we'll work with you in the community to get that information out as rapidly as possible. Like Val said, we try to get it up on ct.gov in a timely manner, but we know that sometimes even that's out of our control, but we will be as transparent and quick with information when we have it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for clarifying, Rob. And building on that, and I know you also briefly touched upon that, I know families are also very interested in the plans for younger patients. And I saw that you mentioned that you're planning to include younger patients in the HALO study. So are there also plans to include younger patients in the HALO study in Europe? And if so, will this also involve the clinical trial centers that previously conducted the HALO study, or will new centers will be opened for younger patients?
Yeah, and I can answer that, and always happy to talk about that part of the HALO study. We're really excited about being able to test ION 582 in that younger population, particularly because it's a developmental disease, right? And so theoretically, the early intervention should be, really important for transformative benefits. So, yeah, we're working on getting the study open for those patients this year. We're not planning to add new sites so it will be the existing HALO sites, which do include sites in the European Union. So more to follow there once those sites are active and ready to go. We're working with them, almost as we speak now. But yeah, that's an important part of the study, and so that's what we want everybody focus on phase 3, which with good reason, but there's still plenty to do in HALOS as well. So thanks for that question. Appreciate it.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
We are closing in on time. We'll still have a couple of generic, more broad questions that we would like to ask you also. This is why we invite ULTRAGENYX team to come back. And thank you again for being here. So these are quick questions that we have. The first one would be, if someone is interested in participating in a clinical trial, what do they do to get enrolled? I would start with ULTRAGENYX, please.
Julie, did you want to take
Hi.
that question? Yeah, go ahead.
I had to find the mute button. Sorry, a little slow on that one. Yes, I mean, I think we addressed it a bit on that slide that you saw earlier. Of course, we always suggest that you speak with your physician first, your child's physician. The other part is we really want to stress that trial eligibility is determined by the doctor or the principal investigator at the trial site. ULTRAGENYX does not determine which patients are offered participation, nor do we maintain a wait list for any of our clinical trials. But we do have that dedicated team that we showed in the presentation that is dedicated to helping families find a clinical trial site near them. And we can help answer questions that you may have about participating in the trial as well. And that's at trialrecruitment@ultragenyx.com. And just as we've all said, clinicaltrials.gov is always your go-to, right, for additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Ionis is the same, or you have different procedures?
No, I think Julie summarized it well. I would just remind your audience that your organizations, FAST and ASA, are really great resources as well to go to for information about how to have a conversation with your doctor about trials, what questions to ask, how to be an advocate, things to consider in that conversation. So I would just remind folks to consider you all as resources as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then we have another question, and I think that's specifically interesting for countries that currently don't have a clinical trial site in their country. And we are really curious to understand, like, what is the process of clinical trial sites? How are they being selected? In short, could you explain like the process and what is needed to attract clinical trials in your country? And then maybe Ionis can start this time.
Thank you, Ellen. I could take that question. So yeah, selecting sites is a complex endeavor. So we do, the sponsor does evaluate various matters, including does the site have the relevant population? Are they able to administer do they have experience administering this certain types of administrations, et cetera, et cetera. So it usually takes a while to get through all of that, to select the sites and the countries. And then I think you asked another question too about clinical trial sites in countries, or?
Yeah, just like, is there anything that a community can do to sort of facilitate the protest or make a country more attractive?
Or a family organization. We do have some present here that they would be interesting.
Yeah,
we-
I would.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think your organizations are doing great work. I mean, I think the foundational work that ASA and FAST have done to build up, experience to, address and have the skills of the things that Valerie just mentioned are really important. And you see that in the high number of sites that are involved in all the trials that have been talked about today. This community has built up a tremendously experienced global network of experienced physicians to execute clinical trials. You should all be very proud of that.
Okay, thank you so much. ULTRAGENYX, I don't know if you want to add on that.
I was just going to underline what Valerie and Rob said. I think site selection is very complicated and multifactorial. So there's a lot that goes into, like, location, accessibility for individuals, what resources are there at these sites, and experience, like Val said. And then also, I think an important thing is timelines. I think one of the things that we all cannot forget is that we want something to be out there as soon as possible. We want as many things out there as soon as possible. So sometimes that also goes into running not only a good clinical trial, but also a fast clinical trial. So I think a lot of things go into that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. One other question, this is more how difficult to answer, is that once someone is entered a clinical trial, especially these phase 3s, how long is it excluded from other trials, or is it not excluded from other trials that may come out in the future? I want to ask ULTRAGENYX, so since we're answering one first and then the other, if you could give us an insight on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of considerations go into that, answering that, Manuel. I think it's a great question. A lot depends on what the previous trial that they're enrolled in and what comprises what they're going through in that trial, and how does that relate to the next clinical trial that they're interested in, right? Are they compatible? What are the things that people need to know about? So I think most of the times it's a very case by case basis, and I think it needs to be evaluated in that sense. But I think when you do that case by case evaluation, you can go into details of where they were and where they need to be.
But during a clinical trial, they are excluded from others that are ongoing.
Yes, I think so. Because while they're in a clinical trial, there's a lot in that clinical trial that is happening currently. My answer was mostly related to when they're out of a clinical trial and then they were going to get into another one. Yeah.
For Ionis?
Yeah, and I would say the good news here is people are exploring clinical trials. The first part of the process is what we call informed consent. And during that process, all of this is going to be talked about between that site investigator, that doctor, and the patient. And the patient and their family really will begin to understand how participating in this trial will impact other healthcare decisions that they may want to explore, including pursuing another trial. So I would just add, in addition to what Vimshi said, that anybody in a current clinical trial who has a question about can they participate in another one, they really should go to their site physician for that trial they're enrolled in and have a conversation about it and find out with them, whether or not it's possible, if it's not possible, why it's not possible, and if it is possible, how that patient works to be part of both trials so that they can both achieve their scientific goals.
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you so much. And then I have a little bit more of a practical question. During the study, can the participants still attend school or preschool normally? Or are there recommended observation periods after the administration of the therapy or the placebo? And yeah, maybe now Ionis can start. and then we go to ULTRAGENYX.
Sure, I can answer that, Ellen. Yes, absolutely. As was done in the HALO study, we can also do that in the REVEAL, and the subjects and their families can continue and maintain the lifestyle and all the everything that the participants have been going to before the trial. They can do that. Yeah, they just have to make sure they get to their trial site at the days they're supposed to be
Yeah.
there, but other than that, nothing else.
Okay, perfect. And I don't know if it's the same for ULTRAGENYX.
Yes, hi. It's pretty much the same. Yes, I mean, we want your children and your families to continue your typical daily routines with school and whatever else you may be wanting to do. And as long as, like what was just mentioned, as long as you attend your trial site visits, right? There's no other reason. There's no reason not to.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, the last one is very much close to this one. Is there any restrictions regarding traveling during the clinical trials?
And maybe we can start with ULTRAGENYX.
ULTRAGENYX.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Very similar answer, right? Our hope is that families can live your lives as normally as possible. But again, it's imperative to attend the study visits, right? Otherwise, you're free to travel and go on vacations and do as you wish. There are a couple of things that would be important, though. One is if you do choose to travel to another country or wherever it may be, that you take your trial site contact information with you in case you need to provide any updates while you're traveling. And the other thing is all trial participants of our children receive a patient trial identification card. So I'd strongly encourage that you take that with you while you're traveling. Should anything happen, then your child will be recognized as a trial participant.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Ellen, I completely agree with Julie. Every aspect of what she said, totally agree.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad we're aligned. All right, thank you so much. I know we've gone a bit over time and I apologize for that. I want to be respectful for everybody's time, but it's been super interesting. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you for joining as well. We know how important these discussions are for our community, and so we are very grateful to Ionis and ULTRAGENYX and all of you for participating today. Just a small comment at the end. So the recording of the webinar will be made available a little later on. So we don't know the exact timing, but probably around a week or so. Just keep an eye on your ASA and FAST social media channels, and you will see it pop up in a few weeks. And so on behalf of ASA and FAST, I would like to wish you all a wonderful evening, and thank you again for your engagement and your support. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.